Hey everyone, RogueGold here. Welcome back to the Division 2, and welcome to my guide and top build recommendations for 2026. This is a video format and series that I've done for a couple of years now. The goal is very simple: offer a quick look at what loadouts and playstyles rise above the rest in terms of viability and popularity at the start of a new year, so that primarily new and returning players have a starting off point and some guidance when it comes to build crafting. Some key things to be aware of. This video is not intended as a here are the best builds in the game ranked 1 to 5, as I don't believe such a thing exists. A build can deal all the damage in the world, but that does not mean that it is suited for every piece of content in the game. These overviews are meant to highlight a collection of my recommendations for builds that cover the entire spectrum, so that as a player, you have the options to take on solo, group, support-based content, PvP, whatever it may be. And from there, you at least have the capability and tools to go out, play the game, and continue your own build crafting journey to find the perfect loadout for you. This time around, I've worked hard to make a few improvements to the overall format of this. For each category and loadout, I try my best to highlight, explain, and showcase some alternatives and options, as often build videos can feel very rigid, when in actuality there's often a lot of room for customization. And then additionally, I'm going to be trying something new, where instead of trying to find the right balance between showing gameplay, showing items on screen, and narrating how to construct the build, I've put together complete pages that show you each stat, attribute, and component to the build, so that you can easily screenshot and refer back to them later. Hope that ends up working out well, but please feel free to leave feedback on it. Additionally, as we go through these various loadouts, I intend to shout out some of my recommended farming methods for particular items. The vast majority of the time that comes down to either the countdown or retaliation game modes. Fortunately, I have up-to-date guides on both, so those will be linked in the description of this video if you need them. Alright, with all of that down, we're going to jump straight in. If you enjoy this guide and find it helpful and concise, then please consider clicking that subscribe button. If you have not, we'd love to have you around. A huge shout out and thank you to our channel members. As always, your support directly aids my ability to continue making these videos at the level and consistency that I do, so thank you so much for your help in that. Timestamps are down below for your convenience, but I hear you want to see some builds, so let's get to it. Our first category in playstyle that is essential for any Division 2 player to have in their roster is DPS. I don't care if you play solo, with your friends, only twice a month on every other Tuesday. The point in time will come where you need to pump out those numbers. So, what are we going to be rocking? Well, as some of you may know, the Striker's Battle Gear set is the most popular and traditionally strongest DPS set in the game. It has a very simple premise, and it performs great every single time. To get yourself a core collection of Striker gear, playing Countdown is the way to go. You should have everything you need after just 1 or 2 runs, but building around Striker is where some big variations can come in. Do you maximize damage completely? Do you convert some of that to utility, as maybe the content you're playing doesn't require that overkill? This setup you'll see on screen is the most everyday general use Striker loadout that I run. The Equalizer named Unit Alloys chess piece just released in-game a couple of weeks ago, but it has immediately become a must-own piece for its synergy with assault rifles, and its offering of Perfect Obliterate. You can easily acquire one via Countdown with Unit Alloys targeted farming. The Exodus Gloves exotics, on the other hand, are more solo-catered, but provide an unbeatable get-out-of-jail-free card smoke bomb ability every 40 seconds, which perfectly complements a low armor, high aggression gameplay style. If you don't have a pair, targeted farming in retaliations while also pursuing its blueprint from the mode will be your most efficient route to acquisition. If the Exodus gloves are not to your liking, the Memento backpack offers similar solo survival benefits, so feel free to swap those out. Retaliation remains the best path to grab one of those as well with targeted backpacks. As for our primary, however, you have many options. Assault rifles are the most popular Striker gun class, but do know that LMGs or SMGs have their use cases as well if you want to go down that route. These following loadout variants are constructed for ARs. However, the St. Elmo's Engine exotic is the Swiss Army knife of exotic ARs, but also just primary weapons in general. It offers a great damage profile, easy handling, unbeatable mods, and an intuitive talent that locks down enemies in place with shock rounds. In my view, it is hands down the best beginner Striker weapon, so I recommend picking one up and slotting it in via retaliation targeted AR farming if you don't own it yet. A few alternative choices to be aware of here. If you decide that you do not need the utility and survivability angle to this build, maybe you're in group play or aggro onto you is less of an issue, the Overdog's exotic gloves are a best in slot DPS item and an easy replacement. Retaliations with targeted gloves and blueprint tracking is the way to go to pick one up. Additionally, if you do not have or do not want to use the Saint Elmo's or another exotic, the Lexington AR is one of your highest DPS options if you own one. This cannot be farmed via traditional sources as it is only available nowadays through certain promotions or events like the winter event that is ongoing as of the making of this video. So if you own one, use it. You won't regret it. Additionally, if you are seeking out the most possible damage from Striker, maybe for a group master mission run or an incursion, keeping the Lexington yet swapping out for the Striker chest piece is going to allow you to double your total Striker stack capacity, so running this and swapping out a few other pieces accordingly, like shown here, is the way to go. But switching back, if you just need more accessible primary weapon options, the Police M4, F2000, and FAMAS high-end weapons with the Killer talent are some of the best ones you can pick. Before we move on from the DPS category, however, I would be remiss without bringing up one alternative to using Striker, as thanks to some new items released in 2025, we now have one. The Tipping Scales gear set is a heavily LMG focused set, so be aware of that heading in, but this offers competitive damage numbers to Striker for a bit more of a methodical gameplay style, same as Striker, though you can pick up a starter set of this super easy from 1 to 2 targeted countdown runs. Now, I choose to tune Tipping Scales for maximum damage and only use it when I feel in the mood to hunker into cover and absolutely mow down anything in front of me, but it fulfills that role to a T, and in some cases ends up feeling even easier to handle and more intuitive to use than Striker. This is the build that I have fallen in love with specifically. Shout out to fellow content creator IKEA for crunching the numbers and finding this stat optimized version to run, including the abnormal rate of fire pick for our third attribute on the M60. I'll link his video where I first saw this in the description below. Highly recommend checking him out. But yeah, if you want a change of pace from Striker, or maybe you just love LMGs, Tipping Scales has absolutely earned its spot amongst the best of the best. Moving on, we then get to what I feel is an incredibly underrated playstyle, one that I feel can make much of the Division 2's content dramatically easier when properly leaned into and built towards, and that is crowd control. Now, more traditionally, this is a team-based role where you're helping control groups of enemies for your teammates to then eviscerate with their crazy DPS. But in this case, while effective in groups absolutely, this works just as good solo. So much so that this has actually become my go-to solo legendary content loadout, as its seamless gameplay loop is endlessly satisfying. Now, the star of the show here, and really what made me carve out a slot for this playstyle in the video altogether, is the blue screen exotic LMG. This item went far too underrated within the community for far too long, myself completely included, but in the past 18 months it has really made its way into the mainstream. The beauty of this weapon is that you're able to focus entirely on beaming down your opponents, and then, when its talent is ready, kills will automatically stun and jam all enemies within the proximity of a target you kill. This is an invaluable perk across all difficulties of content. This is the build that you were just seeing in action. Now, to begin, the blue screen is essential for this. Like I said, it influenced me enough to make an entire category in this video centered around it. So, to get one, head into retaliations with targeted LMGs for your best chances, and aim towards completing True Sun's retaliations in particular to have a chance at getting its blueprint from the completion bonus. Once you've got that, we're then pairing it with the Negotiator's Dilemma gear set. Now, this is more traditionally reserved for the highest of hitting critical hit builds, as it allows you to share your crit damage across multiple targets. The synergy here, though, is that while you take out targets left and right that are not the enemy you're actively shooting, those deaths can trigger the blue screen's talent and stun that very enemy that you are still shooting, making taking down high priority targets that much easier. Be sure to include the Negotiator's backpack in your setup for the highest split damage values. The Equalizer chest piece ensures that we're making the most out of critical hits on this crit hit build, and the Overdogs makes up for the blue screen's lack of damage compared to other weapons blueprints by giving us huge amped damage to grunt enemies. Negotiators and the equalizer can be picked up very easily by proper targeted farming in Countdown, whereas retaliation will be your best route for farming the overdogs with a chance to even get its blueprint. And yeah, whether it's in solo or groups, I think once you try this, you're going to have a hard time going back, and you'll see how insanely undervalued this role is in gameplay. I did want to shout out though that while Negotiators is much more on the damage side of crowd control, if you would rather lean into that more true support fantasy and playstyle, then taking the blue screen and pairing it with the ongoing directive gear set is a winner every time. Ongoing provides damage boosting hollow point rounds to your entire group when you mark and eliminate status affected enemies, and guess what? The blue screen deals entirely with spreading out status effects to everyone in its vicinity, and while this setup can be effective solo, it particularly shines within group play. This is the loadout that I run the most often. Apart from the blue screen, which we know already, ongoing directive can be easily farmed via countdown targeted loot. The exotic mask may be unfamiliar to some. It is the catalyst, which is exclusive to the Battle for Brooklyn DLC and can be farmed via the final boss in the Army Terminal main mission. I use it here as it offers greater damage and survivability buffs for dishing out status effects, which the blue screen is doing. However, if you don't have one, can't access it due to ownership, or just want to go even further into damage, the Coyote's mask exotic is a classic pick that boosts you and your team's damage, so it synergizes great with ongoing. You can pick this one up most easily with Retaliation's targeted mask farming, with a chance to nab its blueprints from there as well. Alright, next up we move on to a similarly inspired yet very distinct category, support. Now, I know we just discussed support via crowd control and damage, but here I'm talking about the more traditional role of a support player, one that can aid the team in damage to a degree, but also keeps their allies topped off with healing. And for that role, we have to bring up what was one of the coolest and most powerful additions to the game in 2025, the Refactor gear set. This set allows you to take one of the most popular forms of building in the endgame, skill damage builds, and turn it into a damage healing hybrid, making for an effortless support build that your group will thank you endlessly for running. So this is how I choose to run Refactor. This is fully leaning into its healing components built for content like Master and Legendary. I've got the Refactor chest piece to maximize the healing output from the set. As per usual, you can get that and all of your other needed Refactor pieces in 1 to 2 runs of Countdown. I then have 2 pieces of the Hannah U brand set, including the Force Multiplier named Backpack. Hannah U pairs great with Refactor as it buffs up your skill damage, which converts into more outgoing healing, and grants skill haste as well to minimize downtime. Target Hannah U in Countdown, and you should have the backpack in whichever supplemental slot piece you go with in no time. While it is usually pretty self-explanatory, I did want to shout out that the Technician specialization here is vital. It grants you 1 free skill tier once upgraded, and that allows you to then run 1 red core on the build, increasing your total DPS output without sacrificing anything. And speaking of DPS, for our primary, we have the Capacitor Exotic AR, by offering great damage on its own, but then also further buffing up our skill damage via its talent. You guessed it, this plays right into further increasing the effectiveness of Refactor. Now, the Capacitor is acquired a bit differently compared to most exotics. You'll need to travel to the Summit game mode and then complete 5 of the Summit challenges during 1 single ascent. Shouldn't be too hard, but if you really don't want to go and do that, then the Mechanical Animal is an acceptable substitution here. Its talent will overcharge your skills, which is still a good buff to receive. And, like with most of the gear we're looking at, this can be picked up via Countdown with targeted AR farming. But yeah, overall, Refactor is simple to use, yet highly effective, and any team will be thankful to have you running it. Alright, now that we've covered some of the most important PvE roles, it's time to talk PvP. PvP is very much its own beast, both in terms of gameplay and building, and while I don't expect every one of you watching to be interested in it, for those who are, I didn't want to leave you hanging. I also play a lot of PvP myself, so you're going to see me using these loadouts a good bit in videos throughout the year. We're going to start with the Dark Zone, and then move on to Conflict, as even within those two, they're 2 very different animals animals. For the Dark Zone in its current day meta, you either go one of two ways. Either you lean into the really tanky and self-regenerating builds, trying to be as unkillable as possible, or you try and be the knife that can cut through that armor. I personally go for the latter route while still incorporating as much utility and survivability as possible so as to make this 100% solo viable. This is a build that I've showcased before on the channel, but here is the most up-to-date version, incorporating some new pieces introduced with the most recent season last month. Off the bat, I want to say that while I love the Eagle Bear and I am using it within this loadout, it is not a requirement. If you do not own one, don't worry, or if you do, but just don't like it, again, I only use it for my own personal enjoyment of the gun. As far as alternatives, the St. Elmo's engine works plenty well, or for high-end picks, I recommend the FAMAS, Carbine 7, or Police M4. Optimist or Strained for the talent on any of those will do just fine. As far as the build, though, you can see the pieces and distribution on screen. Again, the goal is high damage with just enough survivability to last in a gunfight. For that reason, I have the Everyday Carrier for that 75% chance to regenerate armor kits, comes in very clutch. The Catharsis Exotic Mask is a godsend in PvP for its damage ramp up and status cleansing talent. It can be picked up most easily via retaliations with target mask farming if you're so inclined. Finally, then if you've seen the past iterations for this build, then the 2-unit alloys is the big change here, with the salvo named holster and the backpack with vigilance. Just a very solid damage set that raises the bar for a DPS. With this, the rate of fire bonus in particular is very strong, and those pieces can be farmed for best in Countdown. I just want to note for this section that when it comes to PvP builds, there's never one right answer, and everyone is going to have their own go-tos. That one you saw is simply mine, so maybe it'll work out for you too. Who knows? And last but not least, we get to Conflict. Again, an entirely different animal than even the DZ, as Conflict not only handles its balancing differently with the removal of Shade Watch and expertise bonuses, but it also plays very differently as well, like how it has no radar or other directional indicators for enemy players. Because of that, Conflict tends to have a bit more of a defined meta, one that leans heavily on very high weapon or skill damage to take out opponents before they even know what is happening. And within that crowd, one set tends to rise above the rest, and that's Umbra. Given Umbra deals with bunkering into cover to build up stacks, that pairs well with no enemy visibility due to the lack of a radar. Its buffs also benefit burst damage, which is what you want in a mode with quick engagements. And then it can also heal you, which while not the main focus of running it, is great when the mode limits you to just 2 armor kits. That's a long-winded way of saying that Umbra is a top pick for many within Conflict, myself included, and so this is how I choose to set mine up. The star of the show here is the exotic Tinkerer Mask, another standout item released this past year. Its ability for you to mix 2 talents onto one weapon contributes again to create a lethal burst damage output, so in this case I get both the streamline and measured talents on my primary. If you don't have it, the Tinkerer comes exclusively from the Manager Manhunt mission at Potomac Event Center. Swap the mission mode to that one, and then completing the mission on any difficulty has a chance to drop it. Better odds are given the higher difficulty that you completed on, with your first completion of Master difficulty yielding a guaranteed drop, so that's a big source for my damage. We then have 4 pieces of Umbra, including the chest piece. This is mandatory to get the most out of Umbra's stacks. 1 to 2 runs of Countdown targeting Umbra will get you all you need here. Finally, then I have 1 piece of Fenris on my backpack with the Vigilance talent. I think the jury is still out as for the absolute best piece to run here. If you've got a Cheska, Sombra, or Unit Alloys backpack, those will all do just fine. Now, in case you do not own the Tinkerer, or you just don't love the idea of this setup in particular, but you still want to run Umbra, then one alternative I can recommend is to incorporate the Capacitor Exotic AR, which is a meta pick in PvP due to its ability to roll both damage to armor and damage to targets out of cover in its attribute slots. There are several ways to do it, but this is one popular version that I've seen lately, combining Umbra with the power of the newly released Unit Alloys, in particular using the salvo named holster to pump up our Capacitor's RPM as much as possible. Okay, everybody, well, I think that just about does it. That is a rundown of my top build and roll recommendations for the Division 2 in 2026. hopefully with enough farming guidance and alternatives offered to make it approachable for all. I really hope you all enjoyed this refresh format I tried here. As I stated at the beginning, more than happy to receive any feedback you may have on it. But yeah, those are the builds. Any and all thoughts you've got after watching, whether you have lingering questions, you want to share your own favorite builds, or you just want to leave a nice comment, can't wait to go through it all down below. That's all I've got for today. Thank you all so much for coming by and watching, but until I see you next, RogueGold out. Oh! We just got a Ravenous! I might not be friendly. Let's go.
Coming to the Division 2.
Let's go!
And